Hi, my name is EJ Dawson. I write science fiction, fantasy, and paranormal horror and romance. You can find me at ejdawson.com or on Twitter at ejdawsonauthor. My book Behind the Veil comes out on the 21st of October 2021 from Literary Wanderlust, and I have a sci-fi trilogy called Queen of Spades available now.
Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you once again for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission, if you don't know already, is as always to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature spanning a whole range of genres to book lovers all around the globe, as well as bringing fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I am Darren Kazenko, science fiction and horror author, avid reader, and one of your co-hosts and co-founder of Australian Book Lovers, coming to you today from Corner Country.
And I'm Veronica Strachan, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, and your other co-founder and host, coming to you today from locked down Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country in Victoria. Thanks, South Australia. Thanks
Yes, well,
Let's just keep going.
Yes, episode 17, absolutely.
We are.
And as we are we are recording right now. So at the time of recording, yes, unfortunately, the horrible news that Victoria is about to go back
Snap
down into lockdown.
7 days. Just get on top of this little explosion of COVID that we've had from a virus that escaped from quarantine. So we're not going to get political, but we are going to say stay safe, Victoria. And I do want to share a couple of things from Twitter, which is Danielle Binks, who is one of the writing community's stalwarts on Twitter. She's an author, she's an agent, and what she said was, forget toilet paper, Melbourne. I hear bookshops and libraries are running out of books. Yeah, shelves have been cleaned out. So you might want to pop in today and stock up ASAP. Go, go, go. So I thought that was a very good thing to encourage people to do.
Excellent advice, yes. And it has me thinking, being that obviously the writer in me and also a little bit of a tinfoil hat, maybe the publishing company have been having secret lunches with the toilet paper company. And they said, all you got to do is do a lockdown. And so maybe this one is brought to you by the publishing companies of Australia.
Oh, please don't say that. Put your tinfoil hat back in the drawer.
Well, it will depend, because if the news was all about toilet paper last time before it even happened. So they pretty much instigated it. And I know that for a fact, because I remember when I was sitting here working at home, and when Adelaide was about to go on lockdown, and Woolworths, the news had a story about Woolworths shelves being stripped bare. And I thought, one day I'm going to do an experiment. So I walked to the kind of big shopping centre near myself.
Yep.
And I walked into Woolies and was gobsmacked that it was absolutely right. That there was no toilet paper, no pasta. And I thought, I'll continue this science experiment. And I walked down, I think, 100 metres to what we call Foodland, or Drake's, for those of you that aren't familiar with stores in South Australia, which is just as big as a Woolworths. Completely full, because nobody had passed the Facebook meme or read that manipulative news article about Woolworths. So I think that there's definitely a little profiteering that's always coming from these unfortunate matters. But in all seriousness, you're absolutely right. I hope everybody in Victoria remains safe.
Yes.
And as long as everyone remains safe, then maybe it is a good time to just catch a breath, read a good book, spend some time with your family if you are in the position to. And I've got my fingers, toes, and I've even got Bobby's paws crossed. That 7 days is the most of it.
Thank you. That is good. We had a family dinner organised for Friday, so we've just switched it to online, which is a bit sad because, that means I have to make all our own dinner, because we were going down to my son's who was going to do cooking, but never mind. One more thing from Twitter, from the lovely Nicole Kelly, who is another one of our authors.
Yes, absolutely.
She was responding to episode 14, which was our industry special featuring the Australian Women's Writers Challenge, where we chatted with Teresa Smith from Tess Smith Writes. And Nicole's comment was, if we go into lockdown, I'm smashing out the rest of the At Australian Books podcasts.
Ah, yes.
So I think that is an absolutely brilliant idea, Nicole. We fully support your dreams there. Hence, we're jumping on and trying to get a couple done really quickly for you,
Yes.
so that we can get them out and you can listen to us naff on about all sorts of things.
Yeah, while you're doing a workout in the backyard or repainting the lounge, whatever you do to keep sanity going.
Well, exactly. So I've told my husband to gather up some bits and pieces. He's a handyman. And so, yes, we're going to do a kind of rogues gallery, but it needs a little bit of construction. So we've got mud brick walls and things you can't actually just nail stuff into. So a little bit of thought, and I've told him to think about a project. So he's off to do that.
Yes, he's probably very excited.
Making the most of lockdown, and I know lots of the mums are and it is mostly mums who are going to have kids at home. So all bar the kinder and childcare kids will be home doing homeschooling, and they are preparing their equipment, their army of resilience yet again. So here's a little podcast for you just to have a chat, read a book, and hopefully, a week and we'll come out the other side.
Yeah, no, definitely hoping that's the case. And look, without jumping the gun as far as the topic or one of the topics of conversation today, I do have to speculate what the transitioning line will be, because yet again, less than 30 cases at the moment is shutting down a whole state. How does living with COVID-19 look for Australia? Because the 100% undeniable fact that is staring us in the face is we will be living with COVID-19. It is not going anywhere. So far, we are just avoiding it like the plague, in a sense. And yes, I know we're in the position to do that, but I'm just trying to imagine what it is going to look like. Something to look into for everybody. But nonetheless, I think that's, yes, good luck, Victoria, and good luck, Australia, and everything hopefully is going to be okay. But in the meantime, I think we'll get to some lighthearted stuff now that...
Because, yes, we must say that we do not dispense medical advice, so please don't take anything that we say as the gospel truth. Go and find a reputable source and check it out.
100%. You do not rely on me for anything medical.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you need some minor surgery. I'm not bad with a knife, no. But how about...
Horror writer, I'm just going to put in brackets.
Yeah, well, I can be like a collector of scars like the doctor I've just visited.
Yes.
But that's for another day. How about we jump to some news? Okay, so time for a little bit of website news. And if you are a frequent visitor to the Australian Book Lovers website, you may have noticed that our genre family has grown. We now officially have on board our wonderful biography and memoir, young adult and middle grade mascots. Sorry, I was going to say logo again. And I'm now very happy to join the family.
They are fantastic. Yes. So thank you to Steve Lehman and Cassie Strachan for putting them together.
100%.
Steve does the beautiful characters, and Cassie puts them on the shields, and she's done our formatting and all of that kind of thing in terms of the font. You think a writer would know what the word was, but I could not find the word.
But yeah, no, they look spectacular, and it also means, the range of books and range of genres obviously is growing. So very, very proud to have them on board. And you may also, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, you may have noticed that we have begun a little bit of a fun competition, or more of a fun interaction for all of our Australian Book Lover fans, I guess, out there, or readers and writers. And that is, now that we've got a total of 15 different genre mascots, it's about time we gave them a name. And so our very funky dragon-inspired kookaburra is the first little animal on the list. And we are asking people out there to make a suggestion for a name. And over the next week or so, we'll pick the top 3 names that either pop up the most or that we feel suits the characters better or best. And then we'll put it to vote. But everybody who makes a name suggestion, which you can do simply by popping your idea or your suggestion in a comment under the post, then we'll go into a draw where we'll randomly select someone who will win, wait for it, world-changing, soul-shaking coffee cup with an Australian Book Lovers coffee cup with the animal that you helped to suggest a name for.
Yes.
So the first prize will be a coffee cup with our fantastic kookaburra. We've got 15 animals, so it's going to be rolling for at least the next month or two. So there's always going to be an animal up there waiting to get his or her name finally put into place. And so lots of fun there. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the names that have come through.
Yes.
But so that's the actual technical side of things. So we've got the new genres. But as far as news, and especially now with the Victoria going lockdown, it's and we're mentioning that it might be a good opportunity for some people if they're in the position to catch up on a bit of writing. I thought I would just spotlight a few of the fantastic titles that we do have on our website across a couple of different genres. So if you are listening out there and are in the hunt for a new book, then hopefully one of these titles is going to, as they say, tickle your fancy.
Mm.
So I'm going to start with a title called This Taste for Silence. And it's under our contemporary genre page, which is, of course, our funky modern dolphin. And This Taste for Silence is by author Amanda O'Callaghan. And the description reads as follows. The balance of power in a marriage shifts with shocking consequences. An elderly woman recounts a chilling childhood memory on the family farm. A taxi driver with a missing wife reveals unexpected skills. An inherited painting brings an eerily troubling legacy. Subtle, compelling and unsettling, Amanda O'Callaghan's stories work at the edges of the sayable, through secrets, erasures and glimpsed moments of disclosure. They shimmer with unspoken histories and characters who have a taste for silence. So, yes, it sounds like a bit of an anthology or tales woven together intricately, but, a bit of a moody, contemporary, taste for silence. Definitely worth checking out. The
Very
next
good.
one is, without further ado, from the horror genre. And this title is called The White of Weeping Cove, and it's by author Christian Becker. And I think if you not necessarily have to be a horror fan, but maybe if you're a vampire fan, you might like this one. So the description is, Elias Dantrell is visiting his grandmother, or is that Elias? I've never worked out. Possibly Elias. Is that Elias or Elias?
Elias.
Elias. Okay, I'll start that again. Elias Dantrell is visiting his grandmother in the small seaside town of Weeping Cove. On travelling to the town, he is accompanied by two elderly people who warn him not to go out at night. Elias is unaware of a supernatural force residing in the ruined abbey, but his grandmother secretly does. She tells him the tale of a man called Gallet, who lived in the town decades before. He was found hiding severed body parts and was burned alive after being caught. Elias soon realises that the townspeople are fully aware that a vampire has been living in their midst for hundreds of years. When the vampire, Luke, meets Elias, he convinces Elias to come to his ruins where he tells him his life story. But the recent death of a local man has finally galvanised the church into doing something about Luke. They hire two vampire hunters who proclaim they will rid the town of Luke. Elias joins forces with Luke to help save him until he can end his misery on his own terms. And that is The White of Weeping Cove by Christian Becker.
Very good.
Yes, and I think warning not to go out at night, that is just open invitation, isn't it?
Yes.
What's the first thing you're going to do when the sun goes down?
Yeah.
Yeah, put your shoes on. Out you go. Otherwise, it's not horror.
Well, it's not. It's not. Although we did have, of course, a fabulous moon last night, which was the eclipse and the blood moon. So I was imagining all the horror writers going, "Oh yeah, let's get some of this."
Yes, we did have a good look. We had a bit of a just before the clouds took it away, but it's
we had
spectacular.
clear here. It was great.
Half your luck.
Yeah.
But the thing I like about a blood moon is the way it can make the moon appear three-dimensional,
Yes.
spherical, and then it's for a moment you can actually really sort of get that whole comprehension that there is a big ball up there as opposed to just this dinner plate that we take for granted.
Yeah, it was that kind of eerie feeling, that smallness, I guess, of being in the universe and that understanding that there are those huge bodies of celestial stuff, whether it be, stars or planets or asteroids or, whatever they are, black holes, neutrinos, etc. It's like, wow, that is really happening. And I was chatting to one of the kids on the phone while we were watching it, because I'd reminded them to go out, and just saying, how would that have been hundreds of thousands of years ago? Without technology, without telescopes, without understanding astronomy and all of those physics and those kind of things, understand, inverted commas, what an amazing thing to see something like that, the moon that had been your guide being swallowed slowly, turn blood red, and then come back. And it's amazing. It would have been so interesting to really look into some of the stories of our Indigenous Australians who have been around and telling stories for 60,000 years, and to look at some of the mythology that they have behind those kind of celestial events. But yeah, it was really eerie.
Yeah, I think no doubt that those sorts of astronomical events have played parts in all through history, whether it be in literature, whether it be in superstition. No doubt that unliked members of villages have probably been blamed for things. So it's a perfect opportunity to, set fire to a few people and say that they caused this havoc in the heavens. But yes, I remember seeing the eclipse in Cairns too. That was a daylight on the sun when it turned dark, and so eerie as the shadow just came straight for us, and then next thing you know, you're kind of like in a twilight darkness, but every animal around you goes completely silent.
Yes.
And it was very, not unsettling, it was just so surreal. And then, of course, it's only a couple of moments, and then the sunbeams begin to break through, and then the shadows disappear and everything comes back to life. So it's like someone's turned the stereo down, which I'm used to because I always turn it up too loud when I'm being naughty. So I usually hear it go whoa down and go, oh yeah, I'm in trouble. but it was like someone turned the stereo down of the natural sounds and then just turning it back up. So yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And you've just given me a really good idea about something to include in our editing for Family Secrets Beneath a Burning Heart.
Yes.
So you know what I mean, but listeners will have to wait and see.
Yes.
All
Hopefully
right.
not too long. And
No. Have you got another one for us?
Oh, yes, got a couple. So I'm going to move from horror to our mystery and thriller genre. And this is a book titled Colour of Greed by author Gavin Fisher. Now, when Adelaide is rocked by an earthquake, no one is left more shaken than David Burrows. A recently completed apartment building suffers severe structural damage and collapses, leaving 26 people dead and countless injured. The building should never have collapsed and sparks a furor of condemnation by the press and public alike. David receives an alarming phone call from Alice Springs, where the steel used in the construction was manufactured, and the race is on across the country to uncover the truth. As the plot unravels, we learn that the failure of the structure is the result of something far more sinister.
Perfect blurb for a mystery thriller. That's great.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking to Gavin in
just a few episodes.
Well, quite a few, but yes.
He is on the way.
He's on the way, yes. And he was lovely to chat with. Yeah, very good. Excellent.
But yes, that definitely sounds like a good page turner there. And I'm guessing it, I haven't read it, but I'm guessing SA and Alice Springs may not be the only states. But yeah, very cool. So good old thriller, page-turning thriller set right here in Australia. That'd be fun.
Yes.
So, where else to go from mystery and thrillers but to romance? The next book I'd like to let you know about is a book called 8 Letters by none other than Susan Horsnell, who has been so wonderful in being a part of our romance panel, for example.
Yes.
So 8 Letters is described as the following. Caitlin was used to living in abandoned buildings or derelict houses. She didn't expect much out of life. All she wanted was a better life for her brother and 8 letters. Sam was a successful architect on his way to the top of the industry. The last thing he needed was a relationship with a woman in charge of her little brother. And what the hell were the 8 letters all about? That is 8 Letters by Susan Horsnell. So if you love romance with a little bit of mystery, it sounds like, then now's the perfect time to grab a copy and curl up with a good read.
Sounds good.
So I would like to jump now to our very new biography and memoir genre. Although this book we've had for quite a while on the Australian Book Lovers, and I was lucky enough to get a copy, so I can't wait to start reading it. It is called It's All About Me by author Jack Krieges. So this one's a good description. So an explicit autobiography depicting a life lived differently. Jack started to hate his mother at age 6. He adopted himself at 8. He had his first affair with a friend's European wife at 15. From that point onward, everything was about getting to Europe to chase women and ski, not necessarily in that order. This book reads like fiction until the reader realises that it's a true account of how to meld fun, adventures, business and addictions into a life most only can imagine. Verbier, Monaco, New York, London and Tahiti, partying with the rich and famous, chasing one sexual exploit after the other while risking life and limb to achieve the most exhilarating experience. Honestly written, based on memories with over 40 photos and comments by those who were involved. If you read one autobiography, read this one of a life lived differently that will make you wish you were a part of it. And that is It's All About Me by Jack Krieges, who I have had the honour of interviewing and whose interview will be released soon. Very, very interesting and fascinating character. And the tales he tells in the interview, I can't wait for him to share that with the listeners. It definitely sounds like he is jumped straight out of a movie screen, an adventure movie screen, but it is all true. So yes, now I haven't read it yet. I've got the copy here. I'm going to read it, but he did assure me that some of the names, a lot of the names in there, as in the rich famous, everyone will know. So I definitely may have to do a follow-up interview there, depending on the stories. But there you go. And now I wanted to highlight actually a new edition that we received to Australian Book Lovers, and also is a young adult. So it is now listed under a brand new young adult genre. And this book is called Heroes of the Secret Underground, and it's by an author by the name of Suzanne Gervais. Now, Heroes of the Secret Underground sounds like very fascinating. So I'll just read you the description. Young people seek the light for the future because they are heroes. It is 2000, International Year of Peace. Louis is 12, lives with their brothers Bert, named after Albert Einstein, and 4-year-old superhero Teddy in the majestic boutique hotel run by their Hungarian grandparents. All seems peaceful, but there are dark mysteries. The sudden appearance of the rose gold locket and a girl from the past opens the portal to a trail of secrets and lies, spinning Louis and her brothers into a world at war. Budapest, 1944, where they meet their grandparents as children. In a breathtaking race for survival, they discover the meaning of the locket, secrets, heroism of the past. They become heroes themselves, righting wrongs and bringing change to the present and future. And that was Heroes of the Secret Underground, a young adult novel by Susan Gervais. So very cool idea. So essentially, the kids end up, I guess something happens to time. They slip time and become a part of their grandparents' life when their grandparents were kids. So,
interesting.
Very interesting. But that's a brand new edition, and at the time of recording, is actually one of our awesome, fantastic features of the week. But yes, you can find that under the page headed by our super slippery but cool snake, which is the emblem for young adult. So, and I'd like to finish with one more because we're celebrating our new genres or our new genre logos, mascots, and eliminate a book from our middle grade. So books written obviously for kids. Now this book is called Bernice Takes a Plunge, and it's by Anne Harth. And it reads, Bernice Peppercorn's imagination fills her mind and her notebooks with adventure and intrigue. She sees crimes where there are none and races to the local police station daily to fulfill her civic duty. When a real robbery is committed in town, Bernice dives into detective mode and stumbles across vital clues that could find the thieves. No one believes her except Ike, a one-legged fisherman who lives down at the wharf. Bernice Takes a Plunge is an exciting and humorous adventure for readers aged 7 to 12.
There you go. And of course, Bernice was my mum's name, so that means it must be a fabulous book.
Well, no doubt, yes. And how can you go wrong when there's a real robbery, a one-legged fisherman? I mean, that is a recipe for adventure.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, I don't know if that means the fisherman's leg was stolen. That would make it a horror book. So no.
No, and we did say this was middle grade. So yes, there you go.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So all of those books obviously can be found on the Australian Book Lovers website. So do yourself a favour if you are looking for a book, and if take a bit of a look, especially if one of those descriptions again tickled your fancy, and definitely look in. Jack Krieger's got a number of books on our website, which is fantastic. So if that's his life sounds intriguing, then you may want to have a little bit more of a look at some of his other titles.
Yes.
But that is my news for today, and obviously the book news as well. So
yes, fantastic. And I do want to say that myself and all of the people who get onto the website are very appreciative of the hours and hours and hours you spend putting those pages together, backgrounds, the fonts, loading up all the books, doing a brilliant job. So thank you very much.
Oh, no problems. It is fun. I have my trusty VHS player so that I can play old, forgotten horror movies on the screen beside me. And, of course, I have Bobby, who has forever shown me support, as can be evidenced by it's obviously I've already posted it on Facebook, but you're welcome to have a scroll and look for it. You'll see an action shot of him beneath a portrait of a cat. And I can assure you one of those cats is not like the other. That's all I'm going to say.
Very good.
No, because I've got, for those people, how would anybody know, except for if you've been a part of an interview, obviously, and had a look through Zoom, but I was given a really funky framed photo of a cat who dressed as Indiana Jones with the whip, the hat, and with the golden the golden, whatever you call it,
the idol,
artifacts. Idol,
right, yes.
The setting, it looks so good. But the irony is, the cat looks almost identical facial-wise to Bobby, to the point where it could be the same cat. So, but of course, I snapped a photo today and put it up because Bobby was completely flopped out straight underneath the photo, and it's like, oh, he's definitely not the one in the frame.
He's the alter ego, though. He could be, not the super cat, but the one that relaxes at home.
Well, he's having lots of adventures, I assure you, but I think it's happening behind closed eyelids.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, because the paw twitches every now and then. But anyway, nonetheless. So yes, you can find a photo of Bobby and his alter ego hanging above him on Facebook by Australian Book Lovers. Yes.
A quick thank you also to Dr. Helen Edwards and Belinda Grant, who are part of the 6am Oz Writers groups. And I think Katja Kells as well had a look at some of the background for us in terms of what exactly was middle grade, because my children being close to, in their late 20s, 30s, and you not having had experience of little ones for some time around that age, we couldn't quite get the right background, but they've said, yep, that's the go, as you had picked a fabulous one of a young girl swinging. Perfect.
Oh, okay. So for the image.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
for the image in the background. So that was good. Because we had some little ones we thought, no, that's not quite right.
Yes,
so we tried a few and they gave us their thumbs up. So yes.
Yes, thank you.
to
a
the
big
ladies.
thank you, because I was a little bit stuck there.
Yes.
Me
too. I mean, I have lots of grandnieces and nephews, but don't ask me what their ages are. They're kind of little and then a little bit bigger and then a little bit bigger and then they go to school, and yes, that's very bad of me. So let's have a look at what the 14 main literary genres are, because today's interview is with Lynn Webster, and she writes speculative fiction and in fact portal fantasy. So
I like that term, portal fantasy.
Portal fantasy, yeah, which is fantastic. So while I was doing a little bit of research around speculative fiction and all that kind of thing, I did come across one of the things that, one of the courses I'm doing, because I'm always doing courses because I love learning, is Masterclass, which is the online program
yes, I was
where they get all the famous people to do stuff. And they describe the 14 main literary genres just a little bit differently from what I've seen. So I just thought I'd give you the heads up on a couple. So the 14 are literary, mystery, thriller, horror, historical, romance, Western, Bildungsroman, and I think it was Kate Cuthbert from Writers Vic who mentioned this when you were talking about Judy Blume's Masterclass. Is that because you read Judy Blume when you were a kid? Was that right?
I think Judy Blume definitely came up in the conversation when I was talking about what would be you know, as far as a young adult book, what would
Yes.
be thought of as controversial or perhaps confronting when I
There we
you know,
go.
first got my hands on
Yes.
the book, as opposed to today when, you know, with the internet and the transmission of media that of unrated media really
Yep.
that goes through the schoolyard, would something like that still pack the punch that it did, you know, pre-internet? But but no, I wasn't aware that Judy Blume is doing a masterclass.
There you go.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, but in fact, so I looked up the Bildungsroman, which is Bildungsroman, and it's a literary genre of stories about a character growing psychologically and morally from their youth into adulthood. So it kind of makes sense as that's kind of, you know, coming of age, young adult stuff. Generally, they experience a profound emotional loss, set out on a journey, encounter conflict, and grow into a mature person by the end of the story. So, literally translated, a Bildungsroman is a novel of education or a novel of formation.
It's
So
a
there you
strange
go.
term, isn't it?
I had never heard it before, and yet, you know, I was talking to Ian last night about, he was saying a word that he'd never seen before, and then all of a sudden the word's all over the place, and, you know,
Yeah.
people on the television have got the word, and it's everywhere. Your brain just suddenly starts to register. So there you go, Bildungsroman. Anyway, that's not the main thing. The other 14, and we'll come back to these: speculative fiction, science fiction, fantasy, dystopian, magical realism. So interesting that all of those get their own genre, you know, literary genre, according to the masterclass and the experts, some famous people, because speculative fiction is the super genre, which kind of encompasses science fiction, fantasy, dystopian, and the idea, the definition being that they take place in a world different from our own. They don't know any boundaries. There's no limits to what exists beyond the real world. Basically, they can be called what-if books. So it changes the law of what's real or possible as we know it in our current society and speculates the outcome. So it can be so many things. And interesting that the earliest speculative fiction, which has previously been termed historical invention, right back to the days of works of William Shakespeare, such as when he co-locates the Athenian Duke and the Amazonian Queen and the English fairy Puck and the Roman god Cupid across time and space in the fairyland in a Midsummer Night's Dream. So I thought, oh yeah, of course. So this is not calling it speculative fiction feels like it's more recent, but in fact it's not. It's quite old.
Yeah, well, I saw the little bit of research that I did. I was surprised to see that the actual term speculative fiction was apparently used for the very first time by none other than Robert Heinlein, all the way back in 1947.
Yeah.
Who is, you know, a hugely prolific writer.
I've read so many of his, yes.
So the S before the fiction makes kind of feel like science fiction, like speculative fiction somehow for me, it kind of comes through that audio channel where I think it has something to do with science fiction, you know, because of the sound. But I was interested to read that speculative fiction is considered a literary supergenre.
Yes.
Encompassing a whole range of genres of fiction.
Yeah.
Each with, of course, speculative elements that are based on conjecture and do not exist in the real world. Because I've never really sat down and given, you know, the term speculative fiction quite a deep thought, because I thought I sort of knew what it meant, but I realized I didn't quite have my handle on it, because I just assumed it meant inventing things that don't exist, you know, or perhaps, you know, scenarios that, like the general definition is, that's not of this world or not real, or not based in reality. But I was interested to read that one aspect of speculative fiction is that it can create a world unlike our own, with the job of allowing the reader to feel somewhat safe, and then introduce complex issues or problems or themes or scenarios in that unreal world, and allow, you know, the deeper look into these complex issues and discuss things that maybe in real world would be difficult, uncomfortable, maybe not even something that's practical. So whereas in the speculative world, we can create these places that are basically, you know, these palaces of imagination, but then we can, in these speculative worlds, we can bring in themes that maybe need to be, you know, worked through, but they can be worked through much easier and with more attention than perhaps in like, say, real world fiction, which would then could cause, tension or anxiety, or simply just not be the kind of setting that a reader would like to be a part of. So yes, speculative fiction is a little bit deeper than I imagined.
Yes. It's interesting. As you say, you kind of assume you know what it's all about, but then it's not quite really what it's all about. So, yeah, I've got a couple more things to share.
Yeah, please.
One, depending on who you look to, they put different things into, different packages. And is it any wonder readers and authors get confused as to what they should categorize their book under? And of course, with my reader's hat on, I get a bit cranky if I find that, someone's put a bare chest in a science fiction military stuff when I really wanted to read about, the rules of war and strategy and those kind of things. I don't really want to see that. But if I'm looking at a paranormal romance, sure, put a bare chest in there if you feel the need. Within speculative fiction, fantasy, science fiction, but also horror, utopian, dystopian, alternate history, apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic, superhero, and supernatural. That's the bunch that Wikipedia suggests as the go. And then when you look on, I've just received the May reports for the fantasy and science fiction genre from K-Lytics, which is a great group, and I won't give away all the ins and outs, but I just wanted to tell you all of just the fantasy ones, because we're going to chat with Lynn and hers is more in fantasy. I might hold the science fiction ones off for another day. So for fantasy, you can have paranormal and urban, dark fantasy, romantic, action and adventure, fairy tales, humorous, epic, new adult and college. But then fantasy can also come in mystery, thriller and suspense. As you said, the romance had a little bit of thriller. That was Susan's book. So you can have suspense, paranormal, werewolves and shifters. You can have sword and sorcery. You can have paranormal, demons and devils, myths and legends, mythology and folktales, folklore. You can have historical fantasy. You can have romance, werewolves and shifters, as opposed to thriller, werewolves and shifters. You can have dragons and mythical creatures. You can have paranormal ghosts. You can have in children's, you can have fantasy and scary stories, fantasy and magic. You can have women's fiction fantasy, which, as we know from Teresa Smith when we spoke to her from the Australian Women's Writers Challenge, it's probably not one that we want to encourage, that delineation. You can have metaphysical fiction as well. So all of those come under that kind of speculative. Oh, and sorry, vampires. Of course, I forgot the vampires.
No, hang on, that can't be right, because vampires are real.
Well, maybe in South Australia, but there you go. But it is a huge conglomeration of stories, and the imagination of people to think up all of those things is just absolutely brilliant. And I'm listening to another podcast at the moment by Amy Kaufman, who's an Australian writer, and she writes science fiction, fantasy. I think she does middle grade, young adult, and adult as well, and often writes co-authors. So she writes with Megan Spooner and also with Jay Kristoff. I've read a lot of the Jay Kristoff ones. Love that combination. But she does very short little podcasts of only 8 to 10 minutes generally about one of the processes or one of the little bits of writing. So it's Amy Kaufman on writing. So it's for writers, but it's also for readers, because she gives you little exercises at the end. Anyway, long story short, one of her early podcasts was about world building and the fact that the world is so much a part of whatever story you're doing. So it's a character. And in speculative fiction, that world can completely change what happens to your character, of course, because the world can take on whatever evil or fabulousness or twist or magic or technology or, whatever you like. And it can be the triggers, it can be the prop, it can be the tool, it can be the partner, it can be the antagonist to whatever your main character or your crew or your protagonist is trying to do. So, yeah, it was really interesting to have a think about that.
Yeah, well, essentially the world becomes the playing field, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and any playing field's going to have challenges and barriers and pitfalls. But I always wondered, so, for example, speculative fiction or speculative fantasy under speculative fiction, can you have fantasy that is set in the future?
Yes, absolutely.
So how does it not become science fiction?
Well, interesting. So science fiction are usually, this is what the masterclass says, they're imagined elements that don't exist in the real world, but they're inspired by hard natural sciences like physics, chemistry, astronomy, and some of them are inspired by the softer sciences like psychology, anthropology, and sociology. So there's time travel, there's space exploration and futuristic society. So yes, you can have them in the future, but they don't usually involve magic. So fantasy tend to have imaginary characters in imaginary. They're inspired by mythology and folklore and often include elements of magic. So that's where the kind of difference, the more technical or the more grounded in some science, even if it doesn't exist yet, because as we know, many science fiction things do exist now. They've got hoverboards and we've got mobile phones and all those kinds of things. So there's those two things to have a bit of a think about. But the other one that stands out, of course, in there is magical realism, because magical realism depicts our world truthfully, but you just add some magical elements, or you just twist a couple that are not quite right. So, one of the best people, I think I might have even spoken about him before, is Jasper Fforde, who writes about an England and a world where it's our world, so it's really familiar, but there's just half a dozen things that are completely different. Like they didn't develop airplane air travel, they developed blimps. And they kept going. And the Crimean War didn't finish. So the English are still fighting the Crimean War. And then there's the ability of people to jump into books, which is, completely.
Yeah, that's an awesome concept.
Yeah, but it's all based in England, in the little towns there and the roads there, and you recognise the names and the places, and it's like, yeah, this could happen. And I think that is what fuels the imagination of people who read fantasy, is that I wish, I'm going to stop saying we and say it's all about me, but I really so wish that I could walk out there and there would be pixies behind the toadstools, and, I'd be able to flick and finish my laundry and washing in a day and whiz up a meal in a flash and, take people's pain away and all those kind of things. So interesting.
Yeah, I was just going to say, well, the very first thing you mentioned there, to see, was it the fairies or what behind?
Pixies behind the toadstools.
Pixies behind the toadstools. There's two ways you can do it. The first way is illegal. The second way is, of course,
they wouldn't be to eat or smoke those toadstools. You're not suggesting that, are you?
No. But VR, of course, and then the rest are VR. Augmented reality, which is essentially it films the surrounds, but then you internal, like within your VR system, you actually will see your reality augmented with these new elements, these non-real digital elements that are seamlessly interact with your environment. However, they will not get your washing done any faster.
No, sadly no. Or keep the dog's fur off the carpet. That would be really good. Yes. So there you go. Just finishing now, if we could, before we go into Lynn's interview, I want to mention specifically portal fantasy. So portals will literally take characters from one place to the other, of course. Now, what they do is serve as a way of indicating that the rules of the story are about to change. And I thought, yeah, that's so true. So they can emphasize the importance of looking at life from a new perspective and seeing possibilities even in the most ordinary things. And I love that. And I love that about fantasy, is that things can take on an incredible impact or influence or change. So portals can take many forms, of course, holes in the ground, books, mirrors, wardrobes, just mentioned, all the Narnia people going, wardrobes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the greatest portals ever written.
Oh, absolutely. That and the rabbit hole, of course, to large constructs big enough to fly a starship through. And, I'm thinking of The Expanse and is it S.A. Corey who wrote all the Expanse books? I can't remember now. Someone's going to let me know. Sometimes the locations the portals lead to are real but far away. Sometimes they're fantasy worlds that shouldn't exist but do, and sometimes they're not about travelling distance at all, but instead about, of course, travelling through time. And then sometimes it's the portal is really just a means to a destination, and that's more sci-fi things. And of course, sometimes the portal goes to somewhere that's not quite where you really wanted to go. So there's all of those kind of bits and pieces. And I know that the lovely Natasha O'Connor is writing a fantastic portal fantasy. So I'm hanging for her to get that one out, because I've been honoured enough to have a little bit of a beta read of her work spinning out, which I'm hoping is not far away from publishing. Hint, hint, Natasha. But I know she's working hard and she's got a little one to keep going. So no pressure.
Yes.
Are we ready?
I mean, portals is something I've dreamed about since you're a kid, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
To be able to
take me away from the dishes, or take me away from school, or
yes, and then take me to that planet or this planet,
yes,
or to this time. You know, you want to be able to jump in a portal and go back to the time of dinosaurs.
I forgot the TARDIS. How could I forget Doctor Who with the ultimate portal?
Yes.
So for anybody that doesn't watch Doctor Who and doesn't know what the TARDIS is, you may have seen the ubiquitous blue/grey, green/darkish blue, varying colours, police phone box, which travels through time in the, it must be one of the oldest long-running series of, speculative fiction that there is around there.
Yeah, I was about to say, I couldn't imagine bumping anyone who doesn't know or has heard of Doctor Who, but I could imagine bumping into someone who isn't aware of what a phone box is.
Well, that's true. That showed my age, didn't it? All right, we'll just keep moving on there.
Yeah, so right. I call them heroin hotlines, because there's only a few left and we all know what they're used for. But anyway, no more jokes.
All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Greenhaelan is the book that L.A. Webster, Lynn, is going to be talking about. So Greenhaelan, the Chronicles of Algarth. Her newly discovered green magic could save this land from destruction, if only she can evade capture long enough to learn how to wield it. Sarah Martin believes she's put her troubled past behind her and found contentment tending gardens in a small Australian town. But when she's inexplicably swept away to a land being ravaged by an ecological disaster, she discovers a power within herself she never suspected. Unfortunately, the penalty for using Greenhaelan magic in Algarth is death. Forced to join a band of unusual and talented outlaws, pursued by a deadly enemy who may be closer to her than she realises, Sarah must decide if she will risk her life for a place and a people who are not her own. So Greenhaelan is an epic fantasy adventure and the first book in the Chronicles of Algarth. So if you like medieval setting, characters you can cheer for, expertly plotted twists and turns, and a classic battle between good and evil, then you are going to love this debut from L.A. Webster.
Well, then I think on that note, perhaps how about we jump straight into the interview and learn a little bit about the wonderful inspiration behind the very first book.
Sounds good. Let's go.
Yay.
So welcome, listeners, to another author interview. And I have with me today on Australian Book Lovers, L.A. Webster. Welcome to the podcast, Lynn.
Thanks, Veronica. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. Now, for our listeners, Lynn writes as L.A. Webster. She writes speculative fiction, mainly adult fantasy. And she has her first book out is Greenhaelan, and I know she's working very hard on the sequel called, now let me see if I pronounce it right, Skalsinger? Skalsinger. So tell me, where are the titles drawn from? Because Greenhaelan is unusual, as is Skalsinger.
Well, of course, they're not existing words.
Excellent.
So drawn from my brain, I suppose.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I had the title for Greenhaelan, the word Greenhaelan, long before I knew really what the book was going to be about. It just popped into my head and I loved it and thought that's the working title of this book. And then it just became the title and stayed the title. And Skalsinger is also introduced in that first book as a talent or an ability that someone has. And she turns out to be the main character in the second book. Ooh. So that title was very easy as well.
So you started writing late in life. What unlocked the writer in you? Tell me a little bit about that.
I think I'd always loved reading, as probably all writers do. And I had always wanted to be a writer, as again, a lot of readers do. It's not an unusual thing. And I'd known that I'd been able to write other kinds of things like reports, programming for school when I was a teacher. I had no trouble with that kind of writing, but I wasn't sure I could write fiction. But fiction was what I loved to read. And so I had always had in the back of my head that one day I might try this. And honestly, the only reason I didn't try it earlier was that I wasn't brave enough to be completely truthful. I didn't like the idea that I might fail at something that was pretty important to me. So, but in the end, I just went, look, really, I'm over 50 years old. This is ridiculous. I need to give it a go, and really, what's the worst thing that can happen? If I find that I'm not very good at it, well, so be it. But I don't want to go through the whole rest of my life without trying. So that's really what happened. And as soon as I started, I still didn't know if I was going to be very good at it, but I knew that I loved it and I wanted to keep going.
Never too late to start. I am with you on that one. I'm a late starter as well. So good on you for going. Don't live with regret. That's kind of what drove me. Yeah, fantastic. So tell me, how has teaching influenced, because obviously you would have a lot of years experience there. What subjects did you teach? Were you primary or secondary or?
I was an infants and primary teacher, although I have done quite a bit of work in secondary schools also as a casual teacher. And also I have done some university work supervising and liaising with teaching students. So I have taught in various capacities with many different age groups. And I think how it applies to writing is simply that in order to teach, you need to be picturing how the other person is thinking. And I think that really helps with characters. Yeah. And I think it also really helps with trying to communicate with readers as well, as I hope it does, that you can put yourself in the position of somebody else. All good teachers must be good communicators. And obviously writing is all about communication too.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you write for a particular audience or is it mostly for yourself?
I certainly want an audience. I want to share my work, but the first person I write for is me, the me who loved fantasy from the first moment she started reading it and wanted to read more and more of it, wanted to continue those experiences and still does. And so, yeah, if I don't like it, if I read through something I've written and it doesn't spark something in me, then it's out straight away. There's no question. I don't think about what the market is doing. I don't think about what other people might think of it, not at that early stage anyway. Then later on, once the story's there and I'm engaged by it and emotionally involved with it, and I'm starting to refine it, that's when I then think about other readers. But I guess they are in some ways similar to me, the audience. There isn't a particular age group. I think, although it's adult fantasy, it's certainly able to be read, I would think, by younger people as well. And, yeah, I guess people like me who love fantasy and particularly who find it really rewarding to find a sense of wonder in their fantasy. I think that's probably the audience, the ones who want to find a sense of wonder, because I hope that's what I can offer. It's certainly what I enjoy the most. And the books that stay in my heart are the ones that give me that.
Tell me some of your favourite books. What are the ones that inspire you? How long have we got? Is that what you're about
exactly. I have to say, someone who reviewed Greenhaelan said it was in some ways, it seemed a little old-fashioned, and they didn't mean it in a negative way, but it's kind of a bit of a throwback to old-fashioned or classic fantasy. And I think that's absolutely fair because they are still my favourite fantasy books. Lord of the Rings by Tolkien, Ursula Le Guin, even Raymond Feist, people who wrote books that I read when I was, I suppose, in my teens and early 20s that I still come back to again and again. In latter years, other writers who have written fantasy of the same kind, like Patrick Rothfuss, for example, they're the things that I particularly engage with. I might really enjoy the more modern types of fantasy, and I do, and I might even, if I review them, give them 5 stars, but they don't hold, I guess I'm saying again, the place in my heart that some of these kinds of fantasy do. And it is all about the sense of wonder. My first experience with it would have been C.S. Lewis's Narnia books as a child.
Yep.
And I was absolutely heartbroken that I could not go and live in Narnia. And the first time I read Lord of the Rings, I was heartbroken that it finished and there wasn't more story. Even as long as it was, I would have read so much more of it. And it is that sense of wonder, that sense of something beyond just what we see and hear in everyday life. That draws me to fantasy and to science fiction too, certain kinds of science fiction as well. And I think it's something that speculative fiction can do brilliantly. So those books, there's lots of others that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, of course, but yeah, probably those classic epic fantasy are still my favourites.
You've pretty much, lined up all the books that I loved as a child as well. So I think
how wonderful.
We could just go on and on and on, which is just fantastic. Ursula Le Guin, loved her, loved all her work, and all of it.
Beautiful.
Yes. We could have an Ursula Le Guin fan club, but let's just move on. Keep going, because this is about you as a writer. So when did you first admit that you were a writer?
Well, it wasn't until I published Greenhaelan, and I self-published it for the simple reason that at the age that I was and that I am, I did not want to spend the time that it would take to find an agent, to find a publisher, and then to go through that whole process, which is certainly what I would have done if I'd been younger. But I just didn't want to wait that long. I want to write as many books as I can in the time that I have and get them out there. And so I self-published Greenhaelan, and then I felt a bit like a writer, not completely. And then I got some positive reviews and people telling me that they really loved it, and that made me feel a bit more like a writer.
Yep.
But I'd have to say it wasn't until I finished the first draft of the second book that I really felt, yes, I am a writer, and was able to say to people who say, what do you do? I was able to say I'm a writer, I'm a novelist.
That is so exciting. Yeah.
I was still concerned that I only had one book in me. And then when I found that I had another one, so I'm a writer. I'm an author. I'm many other things, but certainly I spend a lot of my time and energy and effort and love on that.
So as a writer, are you a plotter or a pantser, or are you somewhere in
I hate the term pantser, I have to say.
Okay.
But only because the idea of flying by the seat of your pants is not really what it feels like. At least Brandon Sanderson calls it discovery writing. I prefer that. It's there's also another kind of image that it's basically gardening rather than building. And I kind of like that too, as I'm a gardener.
Yes.
But yeah, I tried. I read all the books and listened to and watched YouTube videos and did all kinds of things over many years talking about plotting and how you plot out a book. And I have all that theory in my head still. And I sat down to write Greenhaelan, and I began with a character who I was fairly clear about and a setting and not a lot else, and found I simply could not do it. I could not plot it out. My mind doesn't work that way. I'm very organised in other areas in life, but with the writing as a creative kind of pursuit, I tried to plot it out, and every time I tried to plot it out, the ideas I was plotting out just died in my head. They felt dead. They felt as if I had already written them. So I stopped that and I just wrote, and which meant that it took years to write the first draft because I was feeling my way. So, yeah. However, and the same thing with Skull Singer. However, I really, now that I have much more experience, I really am hoping to do at least some plotting and outlining for the third book, which I already have the basic ideas of in my head, simply because I know that it is so much faster to work that way, to have a plan. And hopefully the draft of that book will not take me as long as the other two, and I will have structure there already and not have to add it in later in multiple drafts and edits as I have had to do. But we'll see. I'm going to try. The same thing may happen. I may find that I can't actually plot it out first. And I take my hat off to people who can. But, yeah, I may or may not be able to do it. We'll see. I'll let you know.
Very good. And look, it's learning, isn't it? And adding to our expertise and putting a few more skills in the bag and, giving it a shot.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your writing routine then, if you have one.
Yes. Well, my writing routine wasn't a routine for several years. It was trying to write and often failing and often leaving it for months at a time because I just couldn't make myself do it. Despite the fact that when I was doing it, I really enjoyed it, the doubts kept creeping in. And I knew that, like many things, I needed to form a habit. And I tried various methods and wasn't able to do that until I discovered early morning writing. First of all, with the 6 a.m. Oz Writers on Twitter.
What a fabulous group they are. Yes.
Who you were very familiar with.
Yes, indeed.
Who start writing round about 6 o'clock in the morning here. Together, encouraging each other, supporting each other. And almost as soon as I found that group and joined it as an experiment, not knowing if I would be able to do it, I had never written that early in the morning before, I found that it just transformed the writing experience for me. I am a morning person, I knew that, but I didn't realise how much of a morning person I was. So now I actually get up at 5 a.m. and I'm writing by 6, and I do 1.5 to 2 hours of writing before launching into other things in the day. And I usually follow it up with a walk, which is also very good for writing. I find things come to me on the walk. And so that's really the routine part of it. And then I'll do another couple of hours. Most weekdays I'll do another couple of hours later in the day, in the afternoon sometime, and that varies depending on what else is happening, and some days I don't. But at least I know I have that couple of hours of really productive writing time under my belt, and it is such a good feeling, and it's what's enabled me to be consistent. And that's truly a huge key to writing anything, is to be consistent, I feel.
What do you think being a part of a group such as the 6 a.m. Oz Writers brings to your writing? Why do you think it made, or was it just that trigger that you needed at that time?
That's a really interesting question. I think at first there was just, when I joined, there were huge amounts of encouragement. That really helped. Just people saying, yeah, you can do it, keep going. And sometimes during those times, people share very personal things, actually. And I have shared a few personal things. Mm-hmm. And so it's not all just about writing. There's also a lot of humour there. There's a lot of companionship there. I don't know, really. It's a group of writers I would love to be able to meet with in person. And I think it's possible. One day I might. I can't at the moment. No. But that would be lovely. And I think we would basically have lots to talk about. But, yeah, I'm really not sure. And I have always wanted to be part of a writers group. There just hasn't been a writers group where I've lived. There is one here now, and I am actually, this Saturday, I'm going to go to a meeting with them and see if I'm a good fit for them and if they're a good fit for me. And I'm pretty excited about that, actually. But if that doesn't work out or whatever, at least I have my virtual writing group that I have no intention of leaving. And I'm hoping that I am an encouragement to them as well.
So what are your writing goals for the next 12 months?
Well, the first thing is I have to get this book finished, Skull Singer, book 2 of the Chronicles of Algarve. I need to get it finished. I am on the final edit. Well, it is the final edit, but it's taking longer than I was expecting because I keep finding things that I thought I had settled in my mind as to how a particular scene would go, and then I think of a better idea. Now, this is not meant to happen at this stage. I'm on the 5th draft of this book, and this is not meant to happen at all, but it's happening, and I have to go with it because I want to make it as good as I can for the sake of people reading it. So that means that it's taking longer than I expected, and I was hoping to have it published this month, but that is not going to happen. I'm hoping in the next 2 months, though, to have it published. And then once that's out of the way, I'm really, really excited to get started on the third book. I really want to get back into drafting. I really want to start thinking of new ideas again, new characters, new settings. It is going to have a different setting, although still in the same world. And really going to push to try to get that first draft finished this year. Now, that's a huge ask considering how long the others took. But if I can plan it out first, I think it's doable. And if not, it will certainly be done as quickly as I can, because I'd love to have a trilogy out by the end of next year, definitely.
That would be fantastic. What's the name of book 3? Have you got that?
Charm Shaper.
Excellent.
So it's again a different character, another character from the first 2 books, who's getting his own book now, and first male main character in the trilogy.
So who was your most or least favourite character to write?
I don't have any least favourite. I had thought about this, and I don't actually like writing all of them.
Oh, that's good.
Villains, heroes, anybody in between. They're my characters, and in some ways I have this incredible fondness for them. And so, I don't have any least, but I do have a favourite, and it is the main character of the third book, a teenage boy. So he's a bit younger than the characters for the first 2, called Keelan, and who at the end of book 1 discovers to his horror that he is a charm shaper, which is the last thing he wants to be, and the third book is going to be about him. I loved writing him so much. He was by far the easiest character to write about, which is interesting as I have never been a teenage boy, but I don't know why. I loved his voice. I loved his head, and all the scenes in the first book, including him, went so much more quickly than the others. So I'm very keen to get back to him and hoping it will still be just as easy, but suspecting that now that I'm deliberately writing about him and he's the most important one, that he may suddenly become quite difficult to write about, because, well, writing is kind of like that, isn't it?
Sorry, Lynn, go on.
I just said we'll see.
You will see. Yes, indeedy. So tell me, I'm interested in the battle of good and evil, because I've been reading bits and pieces about fantasy and classic fantasy and those sweeping sagas that you and I love.
Yes.
Often distilled at their very essence down to the good and the bad.
Yes.
And I'm also interested that you very much want people to get a sense of hope. And I came across a term a couple of years ago called hope punk, which is kind of, weaponizing optimism and saying that we have to give people, we don't have to, but it's kind of the opposite of the grim, dark stuff that's out, which I do also like. I love a bit of dark fantasy. But tell me about the sense of what for you is that kind of hope and optimism and that kind of, I guess it's almost a spiritual nature.
And for me, it is a spiritual thing for me. I'm a Christian. I'm a committed Christian. I believe that there is good behind the world, behind the universe, and I do want to express that in my books. And yes, I do read dark fantasy as well, and I do read crime and thrillers that are often quite dark, and I don't have any objection to any of that. I enjoy it all, but I just found that I didn't want to write it. I want to write books that give people hope and give them a sense that there is goodness and there are things worth fighting for, as Tolkien says in Lord of the Rings. And while my books do not have a specific Christian message at all, that's not what I want to write. That whole sensibility is certainly behind them and comes out in them. And the idea of God is certainly there, although not named as such. And the idea of destiny is also there. And the idea of love is central. So, I'm quite open about speaking about all of that. and people can take from the books what they wish, of course. I don't have any heavy-handed message. I don't on purpose put things in, but they do come out. And the endings tend to be happy because I believe that in the end, there is a happy ending.
Yes.
Even though there might be terrible things, until then, I do believe in that. And so that's going to come out in my work. And the sense of wonder that I was talking about earlier is part of that too. The sense that there is more than just this that we see, and that the more that is there is wonderful and fantastic and good and loving and has our best interests at heart. So that's, yeah, I love the term hope punk. I love the term of weaponizing hope. That is fantastic.
Yes.
And while I don't write hope punk, I certainly read it and I certainly enjoy it, and I'm right on board for that.
Very good. Yeah, I'm a sucker for a happy ending. I have to
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, we're kind of getting towards the end, Lynn. So where can people find you on the website, on, web or social media, online, I should say? Showing my age now, aren't I?
Yeah. Well, I do have an author website, though there's not a lot on there yet. It's lynnwebster.com, Lynn Webster, all one word, .com. I also have a blog, which I blog about reading and writing. I have book reviews on it, which is twobooks.blog. And I'm on Twitter, which is also at twobooksblog. And on Instagram as LA Webster. And I would love it if any of the listeners would want to contact me on any of those sites and say hello.
Any final words for potential readers or writers?
Well, for writers, I would say if you are a potential writer, you would like to be a writer like me, don't leave it as long as I did, honestly. Just go from it. What have you really got to lose? Writing is the most wonderful thing. I mean, it's one of the hardest things, but it's one of the best things. It's more rewarding than almost anything I've ever done. And you won't know, as people say, until you try. So get out there and try. And if you're an Australian and up at 6 a.m., join the 6 a.m. Oz Writers on Twitter and they'll encourage you.
Absolutely.
As for readers, well, obviously I'd love you to read my books and see if they're for you. Once Skullsinger is out, I will be putting the Kindle version of Greenhaelan for a short time on Amazon for free. It's already on Kindle Unlimited, so it can be read for free there. So, yeah, I'd love for you to check it out and contact me and let me know what you think. Would also be great, good or bad. I'm always happy for feedback. And, yeah, watch out for Skullsinger coming hopefully in the next 2 months sometime.
Very good. Lynn, thank you so much for giving your time and all that lovely, generous information to Australian book lovers.
Thanks, Veronica. It's been lovely talking to you.
All right. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. So that is a lovely chat with Lynn, and I know that she's working hard on Skullsinger because I see her going through the editing, and she's getting very close to having that ready for release. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lynn. That was an absolutely wonderful interview, and thank you for offering a little bit of motivation to people out there or potential writers out there that might think, oh, well, I don't want to write, but it's too late now. It's never too late.
Never.
Just start. I mean, Lynn's probably got a huge literary journey ahead of her, so she's only just begun. So there's so much to come. And as she mentioned, she left it, didn't leave it, but it took up the craft later in life. But that just means that the whole new phase of life is going to be full of adventure and lots of cursing at where the comma has to go. But don't worry, Lynn. I got editors that fix that.
Yes.
But really inspiring. And like I said, hopefully the second book could be out soon, because that what an adventure that'll be, having two books.
Which leads us very nicely into the first of my quotes.
Ah, yes, quotes. You beauty.
Okay. So this is one by Elizabeth Gilbert, who many people might recognise from the books Eat, Pray, Love and several other books as well. Big Magic was another one of hers. I particularly like this quote. The universe buries strange jewels deep within us all, and then stands back to see if we can find them.
I like that one.
You
I
like
like
that?
that a lot. Yeah, definitely. That is really cool.
Yeah, because I figure it kind of sits, with Lynn's book and what we've been talking about, speculative fiction, and people going through portals to find themselves and all those kind of things. But yeah, and for me as a coach, this is one that I love because I absolutely believe that everybody has the answer to what they need to do to change their life. It's whether I can ask the right questions that will help them find those answers. It's not my answers. It's always theirs.
Yeah, yeah. And I just love the idea of the quest to discover those hidden jewels hidden within oneself. So,
Yeah.
And I think there's no mistaking it when you find one. That's the other beautiful thing.
Yes, yeah.
Most
And I like it
definitely.
that it's strange jewels as well, because it's not always the things you expect. So it can be something absolutely weird and unique, and it's still a jewel.
Yes, I'm just thinking one jewel I've discovered is in holding my breath.
Really?
Well,
Tell us.
it's the opposite. So I like to do, rather than bounce off walls and go crazy like I normally am, which will come down to one of my quotes shortly. But no, I've experimented, it has been for quite a while now, with it's the Wim Hof was the one that introduced it, the breathing technique. But essentially it's quite an old breathing technique where you oxygenate your blood as much as you can with deep breaths on a very rhythmic way for, say, 35 or so breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And then you exhale, so you empty your lungs, and then just sit. And at first, 30 seconds seemed like a lifetime. Now I'm over the 2-minute mark. And
Wow.
Yeah, but I found there was a barrier there, and that was regardless of how calm I was or wherever. And just so that, I don't know, for the listeners out there, for anyone who wants to try it, some people would call it meditation. I love doing it for the sense of I do it as soon as I get up. I sit down somewhere comfortable, I put headphones on, I play either really crazy space style music or there's creek recording in a rainforest, whatever it might be. But I try to re-access any dreams I had the night before, and I really dive into it and really follow the dream and try and really. And I found that by doing that, you can bring back more fragments of the dream that might have been lost otherwise. It's like, I don't know, I guess smearing a window and being able to see through. And it's just been amazing for me, what I found within the dreams, because the more I spend time with it in that sort of weird realm where you're not breathing, time can go a bit funny, but also the symbolism behind the dreams. Some of them, of course, are just absolute, I guess, data, as like the old art form, or completely absurd. But some have some really powerful symbolic meanings that, are waiting to, well, as you mentioned, the jewels waiting to be discovered. But yes, there was always a barrier where when my body would actually have a physiological panic response that would be wanting to force the lungs to reopen. And I knew that one of the tricks is to get past that. So, and then I have managed to do it by tricking my brain into thinking, turning that panic moment or that physiological panic into a reward in the sense of get through this, and then the next part, there's magic to be found. Or in this instance, jewels. And it has worked. It took a little bit, but it has worked. So I can push past that now, and I'm kind of venturing into new waters. But yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, little things like that. So I was never one for meditation or anything like that sort of stuff. I prefer heavy metal and all those sorts of things. You're never going to find me sitting in the corner with my legs crossed. However, now you will. But I realised for myself, meditation isn't sitting here trying to think of nothing.
No.
It's the opposite. I just love the idea of, especially winter now where the mornings are dark. And it's very still at the hour of the morning because I'm usually up pretty early. So sitting in the dark or by the light of a lamp on a nice carpet all snugly and just going back into my dreams and going back into my subconscious and unconscious. It's cool. So so there you go. So breathing may be something, if you haven't tried it, definitely look into it and try it, listeners out there. You may face some strange jewels.
Yes.
Or you may decide I'm an absolute lunatic. But in which case you would have discovered a jewel, possibly one of truth.
Indeed. All right, but I'm sure you've got a quote for us.
Yes.
What's your first quote? Which
will round this off very nicely.
Yes.
The quote is as follows. He was a dreamer, a thinker, a speculative philosopher, or, as his wife would have it, an idiot. by Douglas Adams. So I think that fits quite nicely to the holding your breath on the lounge room floor, or exhaling and then not breathing. Because two different things. But yeah.
And he did have he was a speculative dreamer. All those things. What a great mind, and what brilliantly weird and odd books he wrote, which was fantastic.
Yes. Yeah. I think he's put a smile on many a person's face.
Indeed, and some dolphins and mice as well, and whales. But anyway, let's move on. All right, so my second quote then, which is, I guess it kind of segues nicely. This is from your favourite, Stephen King.
Oh, yes, always a good one. Good source.
So Stephen says, books are a uniquely portable magic.
Yes, 100% agree.
So that's it. So that brings ports, that, the portals, that brings books and brings magic. So I thought, yeah, that's kind of perfect. And they are portable magic because, magic is something that changes what you're doing unexpectedly, I always feel. And yeah, they're all without effort. And a book would do that for me every time.
Yeah. And look, I'm not even going to begin to try and paraphrase something that Stephen King says, but I have read his On Writing, and then I also got a copy of the audiobook format, which is read by Stephen King. But there's one part I remember where I think it's quite near the start, where he basically discusses the portal or the magic of writing in the sense of his brain reaching out through time and space to your brain. And he said that there's something magic about that when you really just cut all the crap and have a look what it is, and that is one brain literally going through time and space and reaching another brain. And it's like, that is magic. That's what books are, because, and then at the same time, the reader goes into his brain. So so it's this very supernatural communication in it. But no, he's fantastic. I wanted to see if the reason why I was looking up the master's class was wondering if Stephen King had one. I'm going to have a look. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure that he does. I'm doing the one by N.K. Jemisin at the moment. She is a speculative fiction writer from the US. And interesting that she's a woman of colour, and she talks about the world building. So again, it's the kind of world building. And the fact that we don't have to do the whole, like the British and the European colonisation things, we can make the world's politics and structures, and that it's important, for me as a, white Australian to pull that stuff aside and just open my mind to the possibilities of different things. So yeah, it's really good. I don't know, I haven't done Stephen King, but I'm doing the one with N.K. Jemisin, and it's remarkable.
Yeah, but you definitely have to look for Stephen King because in that future world, you need to know how to protect yourself from serial killers, monsters,
and zombies. You're going to tell me?
No. I don't think. I can't think of.
Stephen King doesn't do zombies. No.
Oh, I think he's done versions of in his own beautifully twisted way. But no, I don't think you're a traditional zombie. But nonetheless, I shall give you my second quote.
Yes.
Okay, so we've been surrounded by images of space our whole lives, from the speculative images of science fiction to the inspirational visions of artists to the increasingly beautiful pictures made possible by complex technologies. But whilst we have an overwhelmingly vivid visual understanding of space, we have no sense of what space sounds like. And that's by Honor Haja.
Very good.
Yeah, and I just thought that's, I don't know, it makes me realise how peaceful it is when you look out to the stars. And I mean, and I guess there is space is a vacuum, of course, but I dare say if you landed on certain planets, I think it's Venus, places like that, it's probably, a cacophony of horrific audio with storms and whatnot, but in between, or the space in between, is just an absence of sound. So just a funny little thing to think about. And again, loops back to when we were talking about eclipses, and how important and beautiful sounds are, and you really notice it when suddenly the dial gets turned down and they're all gone.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I like that, and then it comes back and you go, oh yeah, that's it's such a audioscape around us at all times that we take for granted.
Yes.
Fun little quote.
Fun little quote, indeed.
Yeah.
So I think we've come to the end of our bits and pieces today, and I wanted to say to our listeners, if you would like to hear some more, please listen to the previous episodes and leave us a review on your favourite podcasting platform, because that helps the algorithm to find us and puts us in front of more people so that they can listen and help our authors to sell more of their books. So if you'd like to find us online, our website where all the fabulous books are is the www.australianbooklovers.com. If you do the /booklovers, you can subscribe to our newsletter. So as readers, you can get updates on what the latest books are. You can get involved in some giveaways. We've got a couple of giveaways happening very shortly. And you can just see what our feature of the week and learn a little bit more about a few of the people or publishers that are on our website. If you're looking for us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Australian Books. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. And you can find the podcast on all good podcasting platforms, Apple and Spotify, and we're on YouTube as well. So there you go. Are you ready for the tagline, Darren?
Well, I am as ready as I ever am and probably ever will be. But yes, absolutely. Let's do the tagline.
All right. So take care for now, everybody. And remember to read more Aussie books. Oh, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, 8.9 for that one. I'm not sure if it broke the 9 barrier, but...
really? I think you've given us 9 point something for much worse versions.
No. It's just biased judging. It's completely acceptable. No, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in, and looking forward to being a part of your book-loving world on the next episode. Plenty of episodes to come. Plenty of entertainment still to come. And of course, if you'd like to hear us talk about something, if you'd like to raise an issue, if you'd like to bring a review, anything that you'd like to see or hear on the podcast, do drop us a line through our contact form on the website. We'll be happy to hear from you. Otherwise, take care, everybody.
Bye for now.
Greenhaelan, Chronicles of Algarth, Book 1, by L.A. Webster. Read by Emily Wrayburn. Chapter 1. Sarah. Sarah dragged her slippered feet into the kitchen, giving her hair a desultory rub with the towel. 3 days in Sydney, culminating with a nightmarish drive on rain-slick dirt roads peppered with suicidal kangaroos, had left her drained and almost as jumpy as the animals. What she needed was wine, followed by bed. The phone buzzed, snatching her breath in mid-yawn and setting her heart thudding. The stone counter amplified the normally muted tone, transforming it into a bullying demand for attention. If only she'd switched it off earlier. If only she could ignore it now. But the hard truth was that she couldn't afford to miss even one potential client, not while she was still building her business. Clamping the towel to her head with one hand, she snatched up the annoying device. Wattleford Garden Care, Sarah Martin speaking. You're back. Good. I'm coming over. Click. She should have let the call go to voicemail. Then she could have turned off the lights and pretended not to be home. The last thing Sarah needed tonight was a visit from Jackie, especially when her neighbour was in dynamo mode. Nothing she could do about it now. She gave her damp hair one last rub and raked it behind her ears, letting it hang in dark strings over her shoulders. Jackie would have to take her as she found her, tangled ends and all. She dumped the towel in the laundry and unlocked the French windows. Golden light spilled out onto the wet brick patio. Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment, breathing the cool, moist air and watching the raindrops etch fine, silvery lines against the velvety blackness. Her shoulders relaxed. Maybe Jackie wouldn't stay long. Turning back to the kitchen, she fetched 2 glasses and the bottle of Shiraz Jackie had given her for her birthday. VAT 26, declared the looping red letters on the label. Because you're turning 26, get it? Jackie had crowed as she handed it over. By the time Sarah had wrestled the cork out, her visitor was barging into the room, shaking a fine mist of droplets from her springy ginger hair. She halted in the middle of the kitchen, her thin sandy eyebrows arched in surprise. Why are you in your pajamas? Are you sick? Just tired, Sarah said. The garden conference was pretty full on. Actually, I only got home an hour ago. The drive was hideous. She cherished a faint hope that this might give her energetic neighbour the hint to keep the visit short. For good measure, she added a yawn. As usual, Jackie was oblivious to hints. Good, because I want to talk to you, and I can't afford to get sick just now. Too much to do. She sat down opposite Sarah and picked up the bottle. Wine, just the thing. She poured full glasses for them both and lifted hers in a toast. Confusion to our enemies. Some of the wine sloshed out and splattered onto the table. Jackie took a generous swig of the rest and sat back with a satisfied look on her thin, freckled face. Sarah frowned. Do we have any enemies? Of course we do. Melville Barnett is the enemy of every right-thinking human being, and if there are aliens or people living in alternate dimensions, he's probably the enemy of them too. So much for a restful evening. If this was going to be a Melville Barnett conversation, Sarah already knew two things. It wouldn't be restful, and it wouldn't be brief. She gulped a large mouthful of wine to brace herself for the onslaught. Slightly fortified, she sighed and asked the question that Jackie's eager expression was so clearly expecting. What's he done now? Only got approval for an open-cut mine in the Brogans. The Brogans? Shock stiffened Sarah's features. The Brogan Mountains lay only an hour's drive from Wattleford, a landscape of ancient twisted trees, lichened boulders, cool, damp gullies crammed with ferns, dry, grassy slopes jewelled with wildflowers every spring. An almost untouched place, magical and strange, wild and beautiful. An image rose in Sarah's mind. Giant machines ripping at the ground, gouging out massive craters, destroying all that precious, unique life, throwing it aside like so much rubbish. All to make an obscenely rich man even richer. Her jaw clenched and her fingers tightened around the stem of her wineglass until it was in danger of snapping. Jackie nodded in grim satisfaction at the effect of her news. Sarah forced her fingers to loosen. She found her voice. But the Brogans are a protected area. Jackie snorted. Protected? That wouldn't stop Barnett. He's probably bribed someone. Or maybe blackmailed them. Something, anyway. You know what a crook he is. They had a late-night hearing and pushed it through when there was hardly anyone there. No one knew a thing about it until this morning, and by then it was a done deal. A pulse beat in Sarah's temple. Why did men like Barnett always get their way? Stupid? Greedy? She stopped that train of thought in its tracks and deliberately slumped back in her chair, shaking her head. It's horrible, but I don't see what we can do about it. Don't be such a defeatist. There are plenty of things we can do. Jackie drained her glass and clunked it back down on the table. Sarah hoped she hadn't cracked it. I think, Sarah started, but Jackie rolled right over her. With both hands free to wave about for emphasis, she went on and on, spouting enthusiastically about protest marches and road blockades and lying down in front of bulldozers. Yes, but, Sarah tried again, but Jackie just kept going. If that snake thinks we're going to take this quietly, he'd better think again, that's all. No one would ever accuse Jackie of taking anything quietly. Just being in the same room with her was exhausting. Would she ever stop talking? Her voice rose and fell, her hands swooping up and down in accompaniment. The extravagant gestures began to threaten not only her empty glass, but also the bottle. Sarah quickly moved them to safety. Her own glass was still half full, but she put it down carefully and pushed it away. She didn't want it anymore. She'd had enough, and not just of the wine, or even Melville Barnett. Why did Jackie always have to be so over the top, so single-minded, so selfish? Why couldn't she see, or care, that Sarah didn't want to deal with any of this right now? An almost overwhelming urge to shout at her infuriating neighbour, just yell at her to shut up and go home, hit Sarah so hard she had to clench her teeth to stop the words forcing themselves out. She wouldn't allow herself to lose control, no matter how much she was provoked. Oblivious to Sarah's struggle, Jackie ranted on, her voice rising even higher. Sarah's head throbbed painfully. She pressed the fingers of both hands hard to her temples. A moan slipped out between her teeth. The flood of words cut off. Jackie stared across the table with her mouth hanging open. Sarah seized her chance. She told Jackie tightly that she agreed with her, but she had a headache and was too tired to talk about it anymore tonight. She wanted to help, but couldn't commit herself to anything specific right now. It was true enough. Sarah did want to help in some way, once her emotions had calmed down. Perhaps she could sign a petition or write a letter of protest to their local member, something measured and sensible. Jackie didn't seem offended as she rose to go, but it was hard for Sarah to see anything clearly through the bursts of light that had started flashing in front of her eyes. Blessedly alone again, she fumbled 2 painkillers from the cabinet and gulped them down with the rest of her wine. Then she tottered upstairs to bed. Even with her head pounding, it was a relief to be lying flat in the darkness. She wasn't sure what had happened tonight. Where had all that fury come from? She hadn't experienced such strong emotion for years. Not since... She pushed the memory away. She must be even more exhausted than she realised. Damn Jackie and her crusades, stirring everything up like this. All Sarah wanted was to live quietly in this small backwater village, minding her own business, literally. Was that too much to ask? She shook her head, wincing as even that slight movement sent daggers of pain shooting behind her eyes. She closed her eyelids, refusing to think about any of it right now. Jackie, Melville Barnett, open-cut mines and corrupt politicians. She'd always wanted to be a gardener, and now she was making her dream a reality. Focus on that. She carefully eased the quilt up to her chin and then stilled herself, concentrating on her breathing. Eventually the headache receded. She was drowsy and comfortable and had no work scheduled for tomorrow morning. She could lie in as late as she wanted. She took several long, slow breaths and let sleep claim her. At 6 years old, Sarah has never seen roots before. She reaches out her finger, snatches it back, not sure if the tangled white mass is alive, might suddenly wriggle and give her a fright. Linda, her foster mother, softly laughs at her. Her laughter isn't like the taunting of the big boys back at the children's home. It doesn't make Sarah feel like curling up into a ball, wishing she could squeeze herself so small that no one will notice her at all. Linda's laughter is as warm as the sun on Sarah's back. Linda loves her, and Sarah loves Linda, fiercely and completely. It's all right, Sarah, they won't bite. Go on, feel them. Trusting her, Sarah reaches out again, touches the cool, furry softness, rubs the gritty dirt between thumb and finger. See? This is how plants eat. They reach out through the soil with their roots and drink in water and all sorts of good things. Then they grow big and strong. This little one will be as tall as you by the end of summer. Linda nestles the little plant in the hole and scoops crumbly dirt around it and over the roots until Sarah can't see them at all. Here, you can do this one. Captivated, she holds out small chubby hands cupped together to receive the seedling as if it is a rare treasure. And it is. This moment, kneeling on the ground beside Linda, with the sun warm on her back and the smell of green things all around her. Safe. Loved. Home. She wants it to last forever. Sarah woke and stared up into the darkness with hot, dry eyes. It hadn't lasted forever. She had made sure of that. Stop it. You're not a child anymore. She hadn't dreamed of Linda for years. She'd put all that behind her, learned to control her emotions, keep them locked away where they couldn't hurt her or anyone else. Somehow, her anger with Jackie had dredged up memories and feelings that were best forgotten. She closed her eyes, willed her body to relax. I'm an adult now. I've made my own life, my own home. I don't need a family. I don't need anyone. Sarah woke to brilliant yellow sunshine filling the bedroom. A blue, rain-washed sky greeted her through the window. It was going to be a perfect autumn day. With winter just around the corner, such a day was a precious thing, and she intended to savour it. This afternoon, she'd be meeting with a new client, her back-fence neighbour, in fact. Stephen Cooper, Wattleford's new doctor, had just moved into the big, overgrown garden behind hers. He wanted her to take a look at it and give him some advice. But that was later. Right now, this magnificent morning was all hers, and there was only one place she wanted to spend it. She was halfway down the stairs when the events of last night intruded into her thoughts, stopping her in her tracks. She'd been so incensed with Jackie, over nothing really. And then the dream? She needed to get a grip. At least the headache had gone. Shaking the disturbing memories from her mind, she continued down the stairs and into the kitchen. She wished someone could block Melville Barnett's plans, but it didn't seem likely. He had too much money and influence. The mine would probably go ahead, no matter what Jackie or anyone did. Another unique, beautiful place would be ruined by greed. She thrust the depressing thought aside and made coffee. She was still wearing her pyjamas, but she couldn't wait any longer. She opened the French windows and carried her favourite green mug outside to the small, glass-topped table under the cherry tree. Red and gold leaves hung in perfect stillness against the bluest sky she'd ever seen. Around her slippered feet, the same scarlet and yellow was set against the bright green threads of new grass. The autumn rains had brought her summer-scorched lawn back to life, and now it had decorated itself with fallen cherry leaves to welcome her home. The almost fruity aroma of decaying leaves and rich, moist soil filled her nostrils. She breathed deeply as she sank into her wrought-iron chair, heedless of the slight dampness seeping up from the cushion. She sipped strong, hot coffee while her eyes revelled in the colours of her garden. Beyond the little patio, huge scarlet and orange flowers glowed against finely cut deep green or purple-black foliage. Long wands of pink and burgundy blossom reached for the sky or leaned drunkenly against each other, almost blocking the narrow brick path. This was Sarah's favourite time of year. Most of her clients preferred spring, with its tiny new leaves and half-open buds, each clump of new growth in its own defined space. Their highest praise for a garden was that it was neat and tidy. Sarah worked hard to give them what they wanted. She weeded, pruned, trimmed, and shaped their gardens until they were happy with the results. But in her own little patch, the first she'd ever owned, Sarah let the plants have their way, only interfering when she felt it was in their interest. She pulled out greedy weeds that would have taken over if given the chance. She pruned to encourage healthy growth. If clumps became huge and overcrowded, she thinned them out. But nothing more. Seeds fell everywhere, the resulting seedlings growing together into one joyful, wild, glorious mess. Leaving her empty mug on the table, she rose and pushed her way between the wet plants, careless of the soaking her pyjamas were getting. She stopped and knelt in front of a dense mat of stachys, stroking one of its large grey leaves, enjoying the almost animal softness that had given it the common name of lamb's ears. She reached out and gently rubbed the fine silver needles of a nearby helichrysum, breathing in deeply as the delicious scent of curry drifted up into the warm, still air. It was such a rich, solid smell, she could almost see it. She blinked. It wasn't her imagination. The air above the curry plant shimmered like the haze above a bitumen road on a blazing hot day. And the haze was thickening. Now it looked more like wisps of mist or pale smoke. Gauzy tendrils coiled and twisted in the air, right in front of her eyes. Dizziness assailed her. She shook her head, which felt oddly heavy, but that just made the mist swell faster. It was still getting thicker. She could barely make out the plants in front of her anymore. Her head was spinning now. She put both hands flat on the ground to steady herself. Maybe she shouldn't have taken those painkillers on top of the wine last night. She closed her eyes and forced a deep breath. The curry smell disappeared, replaced by the sharp, antiseptic scent of pine. Icy air flowed into her lungs. Her throat closed in shock. Her eyelids flew open. The fog was gone. Her heart thumped as if she'd been running. Her hands felt cold. She looked down at them. They were curled like claws, her fingers half buried in the dirt. Playing with your pets again? Sarah's heart gave another huge thump. She gasped and swung her head around so fast she almost wrenched her neck. Jackie was leaning over the low fence between their properties. Well, I suppose they're easier to look after than a dog. At least you don't have to take them for walks. She tilted her head to one side and raised an eyebrow, a smile hovering. But do you really think patting them helps them to grow better? With an enormous effort, Sarah pulled herself together. She took a few more quick breaths, brushed the dirt off her hands, and stood. She still felt shaken, but she was pleased her voice came out sounding relatively normal. I don't know if it helps them, but it can't hurt. Well, you must be doing something right. After all this rain, the last few leaves on my roses are covered in black spot and mildew. Yours still look great. Sarah turned her head briefly to see for herself. The billowing rose hedge along the back fence had finished flowering, but the bushes did seem to be green and healthy. "You, on the other hand, look a bit pale," Jackie said. "Are you all right?" "Yes, sorry. I felt a bit lightheaded for a moment." It was probably hunger. She'd eaten nothing solid since lunchtime yesterday, just the wine last night and black coffee this morning. "I think my blood sugar's a bit low." "Well, go and have breakfast then. I'm off to get some flyers printed. We have to start moving on this mining thing." After Jackie had gone, Sarah headed for the back door, intending to follow her neighbour's advice and find something to eat. But a tendril of thought was nagging at her. The rose hedge along the back fence. It hadn't seemed quite right. She turned to have another look. The roses were green, as Jackie had said. Greener than they should be at this time of year. The leaves should have begun to change colour and fall by now. Curious, she drew closer. Something was wrong. The leaves had turned and dropped as she'd expected, all of them by the looks of it, forming a red and brown carpet beneath the hedge. But they hadn't left the stems bare. Short bunches of twisted pale green shoots crowded every arching cane from root to tip. Hundreds of them, thousands. She recognised them instantly. This was the way rose bushes reacted to certain kinds of weed killer. And with this much damage, the outcome was certain. The entire hedge was doomed. Tears filled her eyes. She stretched out a hand in an instinctive desire to comfort the plants, then pulled it back. There was nothing she could do. How could it have happened? She didn't own any weed killer. Neither did Jackie, nor Sarah's elderly neighbour on the other side, who grew organic vegetables to sell. Only one explanation made sense. Someone had sprayed herbicide through the back fence. Someone? No, not just someone. Dr. Stephen Cooper. It had to be him. He must have done it when he moved in. Her beautiful roses. How dare he? Forget waiting until this afternoon. She was going to confront him now, as soon as she'd changed out of these wet pajamas. Righteous rage propelled her into the house and up the stairs to the bedroom. By the time she'd changed into jeans, shirt and boots and tugged her hair into a ponytail, the first heat of her anger had died down to a steady simmer. She wouldn't just storm into his house and blast him, much as he deserved it. She would be an adult. She would knock on his door, tell the slimy weasel she knew what he'd done, and ask him what the hell gave him the right to kill her plants. Only more politely than that. When Stephen opened the door, his eyebrows rose in surprise above his black-framed glasses. Then his lips broke into a smile. His teeth gleamed whitely against his chocolate-brown skin. She had forgotten how good-looking he was. His white t-shirt had the words, "Trust me, I'm a doctor," printed in big blue letters next to a cartoon of a stethoscope. Trust him. Ha! "Sarah, you're a bit earlier than I was expecting. But it's nice to see you again." His pleasure seemed so genuine that Sarah caught herself starting to return the smile. She pressed her lips together tightly to suppress the impulse, then opened them just enough to let her words slip out. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course. Come into the kitchen. It's the only room that's in a fit state for visitors yet, I'm afraid. I'll make us some coffee." Without waiting for an answer, he turned and strode down the hallway. Having lost her chance to confront him on the threshold, she followed him, fuming. When she reached the kitchen, he was already at the sink, filling a kettle from the tap. Her heart pounded and pain stabbed her temples. She'd burst if she had to hold her tongue any longer. "Why did you poison my roses?" The question came out louder than she'd intended. He turned, still holding the kettle. "What?" "You sprayed weed killer on my roses. I want to know why." Sarah heard the tremor in her voice and hated herself for it. She could feel the blood draining from her face. The kitchen spun around her as she clenched her fists and willed herself to stand her ground. The spinning stopped. She could do this. Stephen slowly set the kettle down. He wasn't smiling anymore. "I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't poisoned anything." She took a deep breath and forced herself to speak slowly and clearly. "The roses along my back fence are dying because they've been sprayed with weed killer. It could only have come through the fence from your yard. So I'd like an explanation. Why did you kill my roses?" Her voice had risen on the last sentence, and she was glad. To hell with being controlled. She wanted to shout and scream. From deep inside her, something whispered that all this anger was dangerous. She ignored it. "Answer me! Why did you do it?" "I didn't." Flat and unamused. He was lying, standing right in front of her and lying to her face. Bitter words rose. She opened her mouth to spit them out, but her throat closed up, trapping them inside her. She couldn't breathe. He was still talking. She could see his lips moving, but the thundering in her temples drowned out every other sound. She made an enormous effort and finally gasped in a lungful of blessed air. At the same time, words seeped into her brain. "I think, estate agent, the spraying. I'm sorry about your roses, no wonder you're upset." What was he saying? Estate agent? Oh no. She licked dry lips and swallowed. "When did you move in?" His brows lowered in a puzzled frown. "I just told you, Tuesday." Tuesday, 6 days ago. Not long enough for that much damage to appear on the roses. Why hadn't she thought of that before? Because I've turned into some kind of maniac in the past 12 hours? All the blood that had drained from her face flooded back in a single rush. Her cheeks must be glowing like stoplights. If only the joints between the floorboards would open up, she'd slip down gladly. Her voice came out as a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Stephen." He waved her apology away. "Forget it. You have every right to be angry. We should complain to them, make them replace your plants. Hang on. We'd better go and see what damage they've done in my yard first." He turned and led the way to the back door. Sarah trailed after him, his kindness and understanding somehow making her feel even worse. Outside, she somehow pulled herself together enough to talk to him about the garden, but she was operating on autopilot. When he went into the house to make the coffee he'd started earlier, she sank down onto a small patch of ground, letting her mind go mercifully blank. A narrow shaft of sunlight slanted down between the trees to warm her. She brushed her hand over plants and soil, the contact with nature making her feel better, as it always did. Thousands of tiny emerald seedlings surrounded her, each one reaching for the light, striving for the space it needed. Her fingers began plucking out the weeds, giving the others a chance to grow. Dirt clung to her fingertips and worked its way under her nails. The world shrank to a small patch of earth. Her eyes followed the land as it dipped down and up, down and up. The hand found the edge of a clump of larger leaves, deep green, ferny, a straight, dark stem, and above it a neat pyramid of tight yellow buds, topped with 3 open flowers. Curved red stamens poked out like tongues licking the air. Words drifted across Sarah's mind. Sazalpinia gilacei. Linda hadn't called it that. She'd called it her bird of paradise plant. She'd shown 6-year-old Sarah how the stamens resembled the tongues of birds. Sarah shook her head. She didn't want to think about Linda now. She felt bad enough already. But last night's dream seemed to have breached the wall she had built and reinforced over so many years, and now the recollections flooded in, unstoppable. Sarah had been so full of grief and rage those first days after she'd been sent to live with Linda and Ben and their son, Mark. She had screamed and thrown tantrums and demanded to go home. Linda had absorbed it all, kindly and without fuss, and the little girl had begun to respond, like a wilted flower reviving under a gentle shower of rain. Sarah stretched forward and touched one of the open blooms. Moisture welled in her eyes. Linda had taught her the names of all her flowers and showed her how to look after each one. They spent hours outside together after school and on weekends. Linda loved all her plants, but the bird of paradise was her favourite. Sarah choked and snatched her hand away. The tears spilled over and trickled down her cheeks. This was ridiculous. She should be over it all by now. She had thought she was. It had been 20 years since she'd been banished from Linda's home and Linda's love. All because of Mark. She clenched her teeth and turned her head away, but it was no good. The memories had their claws in her now and wouldn't be denied. 8-year-old Mark had been jealous of his new sister from the start, taking any opportunity to pinch her or pull her hair when his parents weren't looking. And then he began lying about her. He would break something and tell Linda that Sarah had done it. When Sarah denied it hotly, Linda didn't know who to believe. But one day, the last day, Mark went further. He deliberately hit himself on the head with a rock. Then he handed the rock to Sarah and started yelling. When Linda and Ben came running, they saw the blood in their son's hair and Sarah holding the red-stained rock. They wouldn't even listen to her side of the story. Linda cleaned Mark's injury and took him to his room to lie down. Ben sent Sarah to her room too, but when she heard Linda going back down the stairs, she crept after her. She crouched, shivering, behind the banister on the bottom step and listened to the adults talking in the next room. "Honey, I think we might have rushed into all this without thinking it through," said Ben. "We've tried, but it's just not working and we have Mark to think about." Sarah's heart pounded. He meant her. She was what wasn't working. "I hate the idea of giving up on her," Linda said, "but I didn't think it would be this hard." She sounded like she was crying. "I don't know what to do." "I don't see how we can keep her," Ben said. "Not after this." They were going to send her away, back to the home that wasn't a home at all. It wasn't fair. It was Mark's fault. Horrible, lying Mark. She wished he was dead. She heard a sound from above her and turned to see him standing on the landing, looking down at her, smiling. He'd heard it all. He knew he'd won. She couldn't stand it. She screamed and bolted up the staircase, grabbed his arm and started kicking him in the shins. He shouted in surprise and pain, wrenched his arm free and twisted past her, trying to get to his parents. They were at the foot of the stairs now, looking up with shocked, pale faces. Sarah didn't care. He wasn't escaping from her that easily. She might be smaller than him, but fury made her strong, and he was already off balance. She pushed him in the back as hard as she could. He had fallen down the stairs all the way to the bottom. Sarah took a shaky breath and raised her wet eyes to the flowers again. Mark had survived, thank God, with a broken arm and some bruises, but Sarah had been banished back to the Martindale Children's Home. She had learned her lesson and never forgotten it. Don't get too attached. Don't feel too deeply. Control your emotions. But she hadn't been sent to another foster family. And she'd never found out who she really was, or where she had come from, or why she had been found at 5 years old wandering along a highway in the middle of the night crying for her lost parents. She didn't even remember their faces anymore. The smug, yellow flowers stared back at her, mocking her pain. It was too much. The anger, the headaches, the disturbing dream, the dizziness, the dying roses. All of it swirled together in a whirlpool of misery that sucked at her, dragged her down. She had no resistance left. She was a child once more, with her whole world torn apart, helpless and heartbroken, longing desperately for family and home. Fog roiled, and the world disappeared.
Let's meet again. Where magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.